20-year-old Madeline Pantoja disappeared in Midland, Texas on May 10, 2023, after a night out. She was last seen at her home when neighbors overheard her arguing with her ex-boyfriend at 1:30 in the morning. The young woman was reported missing the following day after her dog, cell phone, and purse, things she would never purposely leave behind, were found inside her apartment. 10 days later, Pantoja's murdered body was found, discarded in a field, amid an extensive search. Hours after the discovery was made, police arrested the woman's ex, 24-year-old Mario Juan Chacon, on suspicion of murder. Records show that Chacon remains in custody at the Midland County Jail, with bond set at $3 million, indicating that the case is likely ongoing. In the meantime, certain aspects of Pantoja's death remain shrouded in mystery. Her loved ones began to worry about her well-being when she failed to meet with a friend for a planned swim. When they entered the apartment with the police, it appeared as though someone had attempted to clean a mess. They were especially concerned when they noticed that Pantoja's dog had been left without food and was acting hungry, especially knowing that she would never let her beloved canine go without. The outcome of the case remains to be seen. Number 31. Zulma Daniela Calderon Pacheco. 21-year-old Zulma Daniela Calderon Pacheco was struck by a stray bullet at a Stone Park, Illinois nightclub during the early morning hours of Saturday, March 8th, 2025. The incident occurred at an establishment called The Mansion, where a fight broke out at around 1:40 a.m. A security guard, later identified by police as 35-year-old Kevin Henley Jr., fired a gunshot during the melee. The bullet fatally struck Pacheco in the chest and Henley was taken into custody several hours later. He has since been charged with involuntary manslaughter and unlawful use of a weapon and spent several days in custody before seeing a judge and being released on electronic monitoring. According to police, Henley should not have been working at the nightclub because he was not licensed to work as a security guard or carry a gun. During his time on pre-trial release, he's banned from having any guns and is not allowed to have any contact with the victim's family. Pacheco's boyfriend, Joel Chimborazo, told CBS News that Henley discharged the gun when he got hit during the fight. The bullet flew past Chimborazo before hitting Pacheco while the couple was dancing, leaving Chimborazo both stunned and devastated by the sudden tragedy that had just unfolded before his eyes, narrowly avoiding him in the process. Neither of the two were involved in the fight and instead happened to simply be in the wrong place at the wrong time. As Pacheco's loved ones await justice in criminal court, they filed 2 wrongful death lawsuits, although they've acknowledged that no amount of money will replace their loss. Number 30. Blake Bozeman. 31-year-old former Morgan State basketball star and father of 3, Blake Bozeman, lost his life on Saturday, September 23rd, 2023, when he was shot inside a bar in Washington, D.C. while celebrating a friend's birthday. Police responded to the incident shortly before midnight and found Bozeman and 3 others suffering from bullet wounds, including 2 men and 1 woman. Bozeman died at a nearby hospital while the other victims were treated for non-life-threatening injuries. No arrests were made in the case until March of 2025, when authorities announced first-degree murder charges against 44-year-old Cody Wynn and 41-year-old Antoine Shelton. Authorities released little information about the suspects, who are both from D.C., and the investigation into the case is reportedly ongoing. Law enforcement asked anyone with information to contact the Metropolitan Police Department. In December of 2020, a man sharing the name of one of the suspects, Cody Wynn, was accused of killing a 53-year-old victim named Eric Wright 3 years earlier in 2017. Wynn, a known violence interrupter who reportedly worked hard to turn his life around after growing up on the streets, was acquitted of second-degree murder in that particular case. While it's unclear whether he's the same man who stands accused of murdering Blake Bozeman, the name and age of the suspect in both cases indicate that this is a distinct possibility. Number 29. Francisco David Escatell. Shortly after 3 o'clock in the morning on Saturday, August 17th, 2024, police responded to a reported shooting outside a Seattle nightclub. Upon arriving at the scene, officers found 22-year-old Francisco David Escatell unresponsive with multiple gunshot wounds. He was rushed to the emergency room where he was pronounced dead. Escatell had been shot inside the nightclub by an unidentified suspect or suspects who fled the scene before law enforcement arrived. By the time the cops reached the scene, only the security guards were still present. The victim was a young father who left behind an infant son, according to the most recent available updates on the case. The killer remains at large. Escatell's murder was one of several gun-related incidents in Seattle that prompted local lawmakers to propose stricter regulations surrounding the operation of late-night venues. More specifically, the legislation targets establishments that stay open past 2 o'clock a.m. and would require those businesses to obtain permits and licenses, employ a certain number of security guards, install video surveillance systems, and implement other measures for preventing guns and other weapons from being brought inside. Number 28. Moise Fidele. Many of the people who knew 65-year-old Moise Fidele had only kind things to say about him, which perhaps helps to explain why his loved ones were shocked when he was found murdered and stuffed into an ice cooler behind a Miami bar. The discovery was made on Friday, March 29th, 2025, by the Ready Ice workers who found Fidele's body when they went to service the cooler. They alerted the bar's employees, who called the police to the scene at around 3 o'clock p.m. Fidele was pronounced dead at the scene by emergency responders who noted the presence of blood on the victim's body and inside the cooler. Surveillance footage showed the cooler being towed away from the scene to be processed as evidence. Also present at the scene was some fraudulent identification documents that investigators connected to a 35-year-old suspect named Oscar Rivera Peraza. During questioning, Rivera Peraza reportedly confessed to killing Fidele with a metal pipe and stuffing his body into the cooler where it was found. He was arrested on suspicion of second-degree murder and remains in custody at the Turner Guilford Night Correctional Center after being denied bond during an initial hearing. According to an arrest report, Rivera Peraza bludgeoned Fidele to death by striking him repeatedly with the murder weapon. Authorities have not disclosed an alleged motive for the brutal killing, which has left Fidele's family both devastated and desperate for answers. The murder also shocked locals, including an employee at a nearby business, who said during an interview with NBC News that even in this kind of neighborhood, I would not expect that here. Number 27. Caprice Edward Cashaw. 2 people were killed and 3 others were hospitalized after an armed shooter opened fire outside the Portville pub in Hammond, Indiana, during the early morning hours of Sunday, March 30th, 2025. Later identified as Caprice Edward Cashaw of Merrillville, the gunman shot 59-year-old Lorraine Rayner and 25-year-old Paul Olivares, both of Whiting, multiple times. Rayner was a customer at the bar and Olivares was working there as a bartender when the incident occurred. They were both pronounced dead at the scene. Police responded to the scene at around 4:15 a.m. after receiving reports of gunfire. In the meantime, the 3 surviving victims were taken to the hospital, where 2 of them were treated for serious injuries, while the 3rd individual was said to be in stable condition. In a Facebook post, the local police department indicated that the incident stemmed from a domestic violence-related altercation, and that 4 of the victims were attempting to de-escalate the situation when they were shot. According to media sources, Cashaw had lost $7,000 at the Horseshoe Hammond Casino earlier that night. He allegedly began assaulting his girlfriend in the car. While driving back from the establishment, Cashaw pulled into the pub's parking lot, where 4 of the victims overheard the fighting and came outside to assist his girlfriend. Police say that he fired at least 20 bullets during the melee that ensued. During questioning, he reportedly admitted to blaming his girlfriend for his large gambling loss and confessed to being the shooter. Cashaw is facing multiple felony charges, including murder and attempted murder, and is currently in custody at the Lake County Jail. Number 26. Danny Stanley. During what began as a typical outing to Culpepper's Bar and Grill in Graham, Washington, in March of 2022, a man in his mid-20s named Alec Osborne was asked to leave due to his intoxicated behavior. During an argument with a fellow group of patrons that ensued in the back parking lot, he retrieved a gun from his vehicle. As his adversaries ran down a dark alley for safety, he fired 3 shots, fatally striking 25-year-old Danny Stanley in the head. Stanley was pronounced dead at the scene, and Osborne insisted that he did not realize he had shot anyone. He also claimed that he didn't mean to harm the victim, but was nevertheless charged with first-degree murder. In early 2025, Osborne pleaded guilty to a reduced second-degree murder charge and a firearm enhancement. The judge sentenced him to 15 years in prison, which fell far short of justice in the eyes of Stanley's family. During the sentencing hearing, Stanley's heartbroken aunt criticized the seemingly lenient term, pointing out that Osborne will still have plenty of time to live his life when he gets out of prison despite having taken someone else's. She also remarked that she doesn't care about Osborne's lack of priors, which was presumably a factor that the judge took into consideration while deciding the defendant's sentence. Osborne also spoke during the proceedings, stating that he was truly sorry for his actions and reiterating that it was never his intention to kill Stanley. He said that he will spend every day living with the reality that he did in fact take someone's life away from them. Number 25. Phillip Lee Harris. Shortly before midnight on Monday, March 24th, 2025, sheriff's deputies in Stark County, Ohio, responded to a 911 call from the Old Landmark Tavern in Canton Township. Upon arriving at the scene, they found 75-year-old Phillip Lee Harris of Northwest Canton suffering from multiple gunshot wounds. Harris was pronounced dead at the scene, and the suspect, 26-year-old Samuel Shank of Canton, was arrested on suspicion of murder after surrendering to responding members of law enforcement. Witnesses told law enforcement that the shots were fired during what began as a verbal argument between several patrons. According to local news outlets, the disagreement stemmed from criticism of Shank's pool playing abilities. 911 recordings obtained by the Alliance Review revealed that a woman had accused Shank of playing the game wrong. Shank apparently felt disrespected by the allegation and went after the woman, prompting all of the bar's regular customers who were there to intervene. It took deputies 17 minutes to arrive at the scene following the initial emergency call. A female bartender spent more than 20 minutes on the phone with a 911 dispatcher, who reportedly explained that the seemingly slow response time was due to roll call following a shift change. During the conversation, the bartender revealed that she had holed up in a back room for safety. She said that the shooter had pointed and fired the gun while sitting at the bar, and that the bullet had struck Harris in the stomach. Harris had collapsed onto the floor, and according to the bartender, Shank was preventing bystanders from rendering aid to the victim. When news of the deadly altercation broke, the incident was still under investigation. Authorities have urged anyone with information to come forward and share what they know, either by calling the agency directly or by contacting the local anonymous crime tip line. In the meantime, records show that Shank is being held at the Stark County Jail in lieu of $1 million bail. Number 24. Benjamin Matter. 30-year-old Benjamin Matter was preparing to ring in the 2025 New Year at the Fat Pheasant Pub in Windham, Minnesota, when he was stabbed in the chest and abdomen just minutes before midnight. Police found him lying on the floor at the bar while fellow patrons held down the suspect, who was in possession of a California ID bearing the name No Name Given Happy. Matter succumbed to his wounds just after midnight at a nearby hospital, and a 31-year-old surviving victim was reportedly treated for injuries. Happy was arrested at the scene, where responding members of law enforcement found a bloody hunting knife that they believed had been used in the stabbing. Court documents state that Happy seemed confused and asked what was going on as he was placed into the back of a squad car. According to one of the bar's employees, however, the suspect had started to cause problems while playing pool with a group of people, including Matter. One of the bartenders told Happy to leave, and he was escorted outside, only to walk back into the bar moments later with a knife in his possession. Matter attempted to stop Happy, who could be seen making several stabbing motions before another patron punched him. During a search of his semi-truck, officers found identification documents bearing his name and a knife sheath on the front passenger seat. Records show that Happy remains in custody in Cottonwood County on charges of second-degree murder, non-premeditated but with intent, second-degree assault with a dangerous weapon, second-degree murder without intent while committing a felony, and terroristic threats. Number 23. Chyna Shepard. Shortly before 3 a.m. on the morning of July 29, 2022, police in Akron, Ohio responded to a reported altercation at the Oasis Surf and Turf Bar. In the meantime, a 21-year-old woman named Chyna Shepard showed up at a nearby emergency room in critical condition. She was suffering from a gunshot wound and soon succumbed to her injuries. At the bar, responding officers were immediately met by a witness who had chased after the shooter. Police took over the pursuit and ran after the woman, later identified as 21-year-old Gladys Sachet Ingersoll. They caught up to her in a nearby parking lot, where she allegedly raised her weapon in an officer's direction, prompting one of the cops to fire at least 3 shots with their service weapon. After subduing Ingersoll, the officers immediately rendered emergency aid. She spent several weeks in the hospital before being booked into the Summit County Jail on a murder charge. According to reports, Ingersoll had chased Shepard into the bar's bathroom and shot her during an altercation. In January of 2025, Ingersoll was found guilty of murder, felonious assault, and obstructing official business, along with a firearm specification for each charge. She was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 20 years, and is scheduled to undergo her first parole hearing in August of 2045 at the age of 45 years old. Going against her attorney's advice not to speak during the hearing, Ingersoll apologized for her actions, stating that she was genuinely sorry from the bottom of her heart. Number 22. Jacob Coons. Father of 5, Jacob Coons lost his life at just 25 years old when he was shot dead at a bar called Charlie's Place in Franklinton, Ohio. The fatal incident occurred during a game of pool in August of 2024 when the victim got into a fight with a man who was later identified as 33-year-old Deron A. Thomas Sr. According to court records, Thomas pulled a gun and shot Coons multiple times after witnesses separated the two men. He then fled the scene and has remained at large ever since. Thomas was on parole at the time of the shooting, and he is currently listed under state records as a parole violator at large. He was previously convicted of aggravated robbery and 2 counts of felony assault, and was serving a 5-year supervision term following his release from prison in 2023 after serving nearly a decade behind bars. Describing Coons as an incredible man who cared deeply for his loved ones, the victim's surviving family members pleaded with the public to come forward with information regarding Thomas's whereabouts. In October 2024, Coons' mother, Misty Hall, told local station WCMH that she believed Thomas was hiding out in nearby Columbus. She said she had received multiple phone calls from witnesses stating that they had seen Thomas in various places, and that on one occasion she even went to the scene herself and was standing mere feet away from the wanted fugitive. All said that she did the right thing and called the police, but Thomas managed to evade capture, adding to the victim's family's growing frustrations over the lack of an arrest in the case. Number 21. Marquez Ebron. During the early morning hours of January 11th, 2025, police were called to the scene of a reported assault outside a Waterbury, Connecticut bar. Officers arrived at around 2 a.m. and found an injured 22-year-old man who was treated for non-life-threatening injuries at a nearby hospital. In the meantime, investigators learned that another victim from the same incident, 27-year-old Marquez Ebron, had been dropped off at a different emergency room. He died from stab wounds, marking Waterbury's first homicide of 2025. By the time law enforcement responded to the scene, the accused killer, 26-year-old Garrett Piper, had fled. According to witnesses, Piper, Ebron, and several others had gotten into a fight outside the bar, resulting in the fatal stabbing. Police believe that the dispute was personal in nature but have not elaborated on the specifics of the situation. 2 days after the incident, Piper turned himself into police. At the time of the stabbing, he had been on probation for just 8 or 9 weeks for an unrelated breach of peace conviction. He remains in custody on $2 million bond and is facing multiple charges including murder, assault, breach of peace, and reckless endangerment. Piper has other past convictions which the prosecutor cited in their argument for a high bail amount, but the defendant's attorney claimed that Piper may have a valid self-defense claim and questioned the validity of the state's reliance on surveillance footage in their arguments. The outcome of the case remains to be seen. Number 20. Felita Bailey. 25-year-old Felita Bailey was attending a Labor Day after-hours party in Amarillo, Texas in late August of 2024 when a fight broke out. The party's hosts were trying to get around 40 uninvited guests to leave. At around 3 o'clock in the morning when gunfire broke out, Bailey was fatally struck by one of the bullets while another victim, Vititoe Johnson, survived a gunshot wound to the leg. Doorbell camera footage, shell casings, and other evidence led to the identification of 22-year-old Dylan Black as the prime suspect in the case. According to police, Black's narrative conflicted with the security video. During a search of his home, investigators found 3 9mm handguns, including the suspected murder weapon, and Black was arrested on suspicion of murder. The charge was dropped due to insufficient evidence, but Black remained a suspect in the case for several months. He landed in additional hot water with the law in December of 2024 when he was arrested for trying to bring a gun into an Amarillo bar. Officers nabbed Black outside MJ's Saloon and Grill after witnessing a fight and stopping to intervene. According to police, Black refused to leave and repeatedly tried re-entering the bar with a gun while intoxicated. He was accused of being argumentative and was booked into custody for the unlawful carrying of a weapon into a prohibited place. In mid-March of 2025, authorities charged Felita Bailey's cousin, 20-year-old Erron-Javier Bailey, with her murder. Records show that he's being held at the Potter County Jail. Black was subsequently eliminated as a suspect in the case, but is still facing charges for the unrelated bar incident, as well as allegations that he assaulted his pregnant girlfriend. Number 19. Treycoby Campbell. 56-year-old beloved bar owner Cindy J. Rowe was like a mother to many of the patrons at her Amarillo, Texas establishment known as Rumors Cocktails. The community was left reeling after she was fatally shot in the torso in the bar's parking lot during the early hours of Sunday, March 7th, 2021. Police found the mortally wounded woman shortly after 1 o'clock in the morning while responding to a report of shots fired, by which point the gunman had fled the scene. J. Rowe was rushed to a nearby hospital where she died from her injuries. Later that day, law enforcement obtained an arrest warrant for the suspect, 25-year-old Treycoby Leon Campbell, who a homicide detective recognized while reviewing surveillance footage of the incident. Campbell was accused of firing at least 33 rounds in the bar's direction while leaving on foot after an altercation. Several people were outside at the time of the shooting, including J. Rowe, who has been deeply missed by her friends and loved ones ever since her untimely death. According to the Potter County District Attorney's Office, Campbell admitted to shooting a gun, but falsely claimed that there had been a second shooter at the scene and the two had exchanged gunfire. But the evidence at the scene indicated the presence of just one shooter and one gun, and in August of 2024, a jury found Campbell guilty of murder. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison and will become eligible for parole in January of 2037, while records list a maximum release date of July 2049. Number 18. Garrett Stroman. Shortly before 2 a.m. on Friday, October 11th, 2024, police were called to the Big Apple Restaurant and Sports Pub in Fayetteville, North Carolina, where officers found 34-year-old father of three, Garrett Stroman, unresponsive with a gunshot wound to the head. He was pronounced dead at the scene, and investigators began working to identify and locate the shooter. Based on eyewitness accounts and surveillance footage, law enforcement identified the suspect as 32-year-old Nicholas Galberth. According to witnesses, Galberth shot Stroman in the bar's enclosed outdoor patio. Officers spoke with Stroman's girlfriend, Mary Reed, who said that Galberth left the club and returned before the shooting. Reed told the local station WRAL that she suspected the club's employees of failing to search Galberth when he re-entered the business. She believes that this might be how the suspect managed to get a weapon inside the establishment despite the presence of security guards. Galberth and Stroman reportedly knew each other, although the nature of their relationship is unknown. Several hours after the shooting, police arrested Galberth on suspicion of first-degree murder. Records show that he's currently being held without bond at the Cumberland County Detention Center, pending the outcome of his case. An elderly woman who lives nearby told ABC 11 that the area has become increasingly dangerous in recent years, amid an apparent uptick in gun violence and incidents involving police responses. Jose Diaz, a business owner who runs a gift shop next door to the Big Apple, described the club's owner as a good person and said that it's a popular hangout for retired military personnel. He said that fights there are not unheard of, but was quick to add that these types of things tend to happen in drinking environments, indicating that he doesn't necessarily blame the area's alleged rise in crime for what happened. Number 17. Christopher Ryan Correa. In what one prosecutor would later describe as a completely senseless act of violence, 35-year-old Christopher Ryan Correa was shot to death during an argument outside an El Paso, Texas oyster bar in September of 2022. He and a friend were leaving the 10-4 oyster pub at around 2:20 in the morning when they got into what appeared to be an escalating argument with 27-year-old Alexander Diaz. Surveillance footage showed Diaz walking away, getting into the passenger seat of a nearby car, and then exiting the vehicle with a rifle. He approached Correa on foot and shot him multiple times, then returned to the car, put the rifle in the trunk, and picked the spent shell casings up off the ground. Diaz got back into the vehicle and rode away, but his attempt to evade law enforcement was short-lived. An eyewitness identified him as the shooter, and he was arrested for murder later that day by the U.S. Marshals Lone Star Fugitive Task Force. 5 days after the shooting, authorities arrested the alleged getaway driver, 24-year-old Rachel Ramona Revolta, on a murder charge. She's currently free on a $100,000 surety bond and appears to be awaiting trial. In March of 2025, Diaz pleaded guilty to murder. 2 counts of tampering with evidence were dropped in exchange for his plea, and he was sentenced to 50 years in prison with credit for more than 2 years of time served while in pre-trial detention. Number 16. Morey Pinard III and Michael Vititoe. During what began as a typical outing to the Rock Irish pub in Lake Worth, Florida, in December 2024, a customer accidentally bumped into 2 men while taking photos of his friends and dropped his camera onto the floor. He picked his camera up and asked the fellow patrons if they were okay, but they immediately became hostile and asked the man if he had a problem. Later identified as 23-year-old Morey S. Pinard III of Delray Beach and 29-year-old Michael B. Vititoe of Boynton Beach, the irate patrons reportedly challenged the man who had dropped his camera to step outside with them. The situation quickly escalated, with Vititoe punching the man in the face while Pinard allegedly pulled a gun and began shooting inside the bar. An estimated 9 to 10 shots were fired before Vititoe and Pinard fled the scene. 4 bystanders were shot, including 33-year-old Christopher Allen and 24-year-old Stephen Stratis, who died in the immediate aftermath of the incident. A third victim, 50-year-old Reginald Gordon, died 3 weeks later after contracting pneumonia while in the hospital, and a 4th victim survived their injuries. All 4 of the victims worked together at the nearby Old Key Limehouse and were playing pool during an employee party when the gunfire broke out. According to news reports, Vititoe and Pinard were at the pub with Vititoe's girlfriend, who was attending the party with her co-workers. The man who was the initial target of the confrontation survived and was able to assist with the investigation. Police also uncovered surveillance footage which appeared to corroborate witnesses' accounts of what had happened. Pinard is currently in custody without bond at the Palm Beach County Jail. He's facing 3 counts of second-degree murder and 1 count each of attempted second-degree murder, shooting into a building, and being a felon in possession of a firearm. Vititoe was initially released on bond after being arrested for battery and accessory after the fact, but prosecutors have since charged him with 3 counts of murder, landing him back behind bars without bond amid the ongoing case. Number 15. Ayden Burt. 28-year-old Ayden Burt was a beloved volleyball coach and English teacher whose life was unexpectedly taken at a rooftop bar in San Antonio, Texas in July of 2024. She was in town for the Texas High School Coaches Association conference when she was struck by a stray bullet just after midnight at the Smoke Sky Bar. According to reports, Burt was sitting on the rooftop during a training session with her back facing nearby Interstate 37 when she was shot from behind. She died from her injuries at a nearby hospital, and the shooter remains at large. In the weeks after the tragedy, authorities sought the public's help with their search for a black or dark-colored vehicle that they believe is linked to the shooting. Law enforcement released a surveillance image of the car, but no arrests have been made. In September 2024, the owner of the business where the shooting occurred announced the implementation of heightened safety measures in an effort to prevent a similar incident from happening in the future. Perhaps the biggest among these changes is the transition of Sky Bar from an open-air venue to one that only offers enclosed seating. In a statement, the owner said that they took the community's feedback to heart and that they're committed to providing the highest standard of service possible. Number 14. James Jorgenson. The 4th of July is almost always a busy day for law enforcement in America, and 2024 was no exception for the Grand Forks Police Department in North Dakota. During the holiday festivities, officers responded to a report of shots fired at Sledster's Food and Brew, where they found 53-year-old James Jorgenson lying on the ground with gunshot wounds. He had been shot inside the bar and was pronounced dead at the scene. According to court documents, witnesses reported seeing 26-year-old Nicholas John Narveson pulling a handgun and firing multiple rounds at the victim before fleeing on foot. He was apprehended a short while later and is facing charges of murder, terrorizing, reckless endangerment, and criminal mischief. The judge overseeing the case ordered Narveson to undergo a mental evaluation to determine if he was capable of understanding the allegations against him. He was declared competent to stand trial in October 2024 and pleaded not guilty to the charges the following month. The case appears to be ongoing. If convicted as charged, Narveson could face life in prison without the possibility of parole. Number 13. Justin Smith. In July of 2023, the family of 31-year-old Justin Smith was devastated to learn that he had been killed at the Aloha Backyard Bar in Oklahoma City following an argument during the early morning hours. Officers found him dead from a gunshot wound to the chest while responding to a call about a shooting at the business. While investigating the incident, they identified 23-year-old Jonathan Thomas as the alleged gunman and arrested him on suspicion of first-degree murder. According to law enforcement, Smith and Thomas were involved in an altercation prior to the shooting. Authorities released few other details regarding the circumstances leading up to the deadly gunfire. A woman who witnessed the incident told police that Smith told her he had been shot and to call 911 before he fell unconscious and died. Thomas reportedly admitted to drinking 10 beers at the bar and did not deny being the shooter, but refused to answer questions and requested an attorney. He pleaded not guilty and remained in custody for more than a year before being released on pre-trial house arrest in October 2024. The decision to release him on GPS monitoring came after his defense attorneys filed a motion asking the judge to reduce his bond, but Thomas's limited freedom proved to be short-lived. Following a week-long trial in January 2025, a jury found him guilty as charged and recommended a life sentence. Number 12. Andrej Kucher. During an otherwise ordinary fight in November 2024, gunfire broke out at Shay's Tavern in Reno, Nevada, killing 36-year-old Andrej Kucher and injuring several other victims, including a man who suffered critical injuries and 2 other individuals who were hospitalized in stable condition. Kucher suffered a gunshot wound to the head and was pronounced dead shortly after arriving at the emergency room. At 3:30 p.m. the following afternoon, police announced the arrest of the suspected shooter, 42-year-old John Paul Seger, on charges of open murder, 3 counts of battery with a deadly weapon, and 1 count each of carrying a concealed firearm and possession of a firearm by a prohibited individual. Seger was apprehended near Dick Taylor Park in a joint operation by the Reno Police Department's SWAT and Critical Incident Negotiation Team. Law enforcement credited the public with providing information that proved crucial to the suspect's capture, but provided limited details on the series of events that they believe led up to the shooting. At the time, detectives were reportedly still working to establish a motive for the crime. Records show that Seger is being held at the Washoe County Jail as he awaits the next steps in his case. Number 11. Erron-Javier Johnson. 28-year-old Erron-Javier Johnson was killed, and 2 other victims were injured when a night at a Charleston, South Carolina pool hall went awry in December 2021. According to prosecutors, surveillance footage showed the suspected killer, 37-year-old Quantus Morty Green, instigating an altercation with the victim and shooting him in the neck. The defense, on the other hand, accused Johnson of starting the deadly disagreement and argued that Green only fired in self-defense when he saw the victim reaching for a gun. Green had already admitted during police questioning that he wasn't entirely sure if Johnson was reaching for a gun, but that he drew this conclusion based on the victim's body language. To further complicate matters, investigators found that Johnson had, in fact, pulled a gun from his waistband and shot 2 people in the billiard hall before he could be seen collapsing from his injuries. Part of the incident was captured in the security video, but it wasn't a slam dunk case, and supporters were present on both sides of the courtroom during Green's trial in March of 2025. The defense urged the jury not to pay attention to the surveillance footage, claiming that there was more to the story, while the prosecution relied heavily on the video as alleged proof of Green's crimes. Matters became even more complicated during the deliberation phase when a juror refused to participate in the discussions because they felt unsafe. Once the issue was resolved, the jury ran into further problems and asked to review witness testimony that was not yet transcribed on paper. The judge ordered the jurors to make their decision based on the materials that were available, and the deliberations resumed. Green was ultimately found guilty of murder and possession of a weapon during the commission of a violent crime, landing him a straight prison sentence of 30 years. Number 10. Kenyauta Vesey-Keith. a long-running dispute between two Iowa men ended in murder in June of 2023 when 23-year-old Kenyauta Vesey-Keith was shot dead outside a Cedar Rapids bar called Popper and Tommy's. Police identified the gunman as a man in his 20s named Denzel Wilson, who was accused of killing Vesey-Keith in a bid for revenge over an incident that had occurred 7 years earlier. Back in 2016, when Vesey-Keith was still a teenager, he had been charged with first-degree murder for the shooting death of a fellow teen during a street fight involving at least a dozen participants. He was acquitted of the charge in 2018 after successfully arguing in court that he had acted in self-defense, but Wilson apparently harbored a lingering grudge which led to Vesey-Keith's death 5 years later. On the night of the more recent shooting, Wilson was at the neighborhood hangout with his former co-worker, Jalen Jackson. During Wilson's murder trial in February 2025, Jackson testified that Wilson became tense when Vesey-Keith showed up at the bar, even though Keith wasn't being confrontational. Jackson told the court that he told Wilson to remain calm, only to hear gunshots moments later, prompting him to run for safety without looking to see what had happened. He said that he believed Wilson was the shooter despite not having seen the incident firsthand. After deliberating for 4 hours, the jury found Wilson guilty of first-degree murder, which carries an automatic life sentence in the state of Iowa. He petitioned for a new trial, but the judge rejected the motion and imposed Wilson's punishment accordingly. Number 9. Joseph Reynaldo Olivari. 38-year-old Joseph Reynaldo Olivari landed on the Texas Department of Public Safety's 10 most wanted fugitives list in February 2025 when he cut off his GPS ankle monitor and went on the run from law enforcement. Just days earlier, he had been arrested for unlawfully shooting a gun during a fight outside a San Antonio bar. Footage captured by an onlooker showed a crowd dispersing as multiple gunshots rang out. Police took Olivari into custody during the early morning hours while responding to reports about the brawl. He had tried leaving the scene but was being detained by a security guard when officers arrived. Witnesses identified Olivari as the person who fired the gunshots, and police found a gun beneath the floorboard of a car he had been seen riding in. Law enforcement also recovered spent shell casings at the scene which matched the caliber of the gun that had been found inside the vehicle. Olivari was released from jail on an ankle monitor the following day after posting bonds totaling $70,000. In addition to having to wear the GPS device, he was ordered to remain under house arrest. He went on the run 2 days later. Given Olivari's criminal past, which spans 2 decades, and his alleged ties to the Mexican mafia, many people wondered why he was granted bond in the first place. Bexar County District Attorney Joe Gonzalez told News 4 San Antonio that his office recommended the bond amount, but that the decision was ultimately up to the judge. Authorities wasted no time informing the public of Olivari's wanted status and urging anyone with information to come forward. Olivari was captured in early March and is now being held without bond as he awaits his next court hearing. In addition to the charges he was already facing for the shooting incident, including being a felon in possession of a firearm and discharging a firearm in a municipality, he's now charged with tampering with an electronic monitoring device. Number 8. Aaron Walker and Franklin Spencer. A Connecticut family was rocked by a double tragedy in February of 2020 when 43-year-old Aaron Walker and his brother, 42-year-old Franklin Spencer, were gunned down outside a Bloomfield restaurant. Police found the brothers suffering from gunshot wounds while responding to Elizabeth's Bar and Restaurant. Just after 1 o'clock in the morning, one of the men had been shot in the chest while the other had suffered a gunshot wound to the head, and both victims were pronounced dead at a nearby hospital. According to police, Walker and Spencer had gotten into an argument with a fellow bar patron. What began as a verbal dispute quickly escalated into physical violence and spilled out into the parking lot, where the fatal shots were fired. Several months later, authorities announced a $5,000 reward for information leading to the arrest of the accused shooter, Russell Smith, who was in his mid-40s at the time. Smith turned himself over to law enforcement several days later after his friends helped coordinate his surrender, finally ending a month-long manhunt. He was detained in lieu of $5 million bond, and in August 2024, a jury found him guilty of Franklin Spencer's murder. The judge sentenced him to 50 years in prison for the charge, along with a firearm enhancement. In October 2024, Smith pleaded guilty to manslaughter for the death of Aaron Walker and received a concurrent 20-year sentence. Records list an anticipated release date of August 2070, at which point he'll be well into his 90s. Number 7. Enrique Santiago Gasca-Sanchez. 37-year-old Enrique Santiago Gasca-Sanchez got into an argument at a bar on San Antonio's south side in December 2021 and paid for it with his life. The fatal altercation occurred just minutes before closing time outside the El Cubilete sports bar, where authorities say the victim was shot by two teenage boys who weren't even old enough to enter the establishment. According to court documents, Gasca-Sanchez had just gotten into an argument with 33-year-old Flor Salazar. Shortly thereafter, Salazar's 18-year-old son, Brian Gonzalez, and his younger brother pulled up to the scene. They exited their vehicle and located Gasca-Sanchez on foot before shooting him and fleeing the scene. The brothers came to the bar after receiving a call from their mother, who told police that Gasca-Sanchez had threatened her life. In the meantime, bar employees told investigators that both Salazar and Gasca-Sanchez were regular customers, and until that point, the two had seemed to get along fine. Salazar, Gonzalez, and the unnamed juvenile suspect were all charged with murder. While the outcome of the case is unclear, none of the suspects appear to be in state custody at this time. Number 6. Yordi Arevalo. On Valentine's Day in 2022, police responded to a reported shooting at the Friendly Sons of Newport bar in Rhode Island. 25-year-old Yordi Arevalo had been shot 4 times by a man who was later identified as 33-year-old Shamik Steele. Arevalo died from his injuries while another victim was treated and released for a non-life-threatening gunshot wound. Witnesses told officers that Steele had been drinking at the bar with 2 friends earlier that evening. The trio reportedly left, then returned, at which point Steele entered the building and opened fire on Arevalo. He then fled on foot and was later captured after being identified as the shooter by a detective who recognized him from previous police encounters. In December 2024, Steele pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and felony assault. He was sentenced to life in prison. One of his co-defendants, 31-year-old Xavier Perry, pleaded no contest to 2 counts of conspiracy to commit a felony in exchange for 4 other counts being dropped. A third defendant, 49-year-old Dwayne Logan, is scheduled to go to trial in May for 6 charges, including first-degree murder, felony assault, and 2 counts each of discharging a firearm while committing a crime, and conspiracy. Number 5. Sam Van Dyke. 31-year-old Samuel Van Dyke was trying to do the right thing when he confronted a man who was harassing a woman at the Church Bar in Portland, Oregon. In November 2024, Van Dyke's girlfriend, Kaylee Woods, later told police that her boyfriend decided to intervene when he overheard 28-year-old Abraham Bravo speaking loudly and disrespectfully to a female over the phone. According to Woods, Van Dyke told Bravo to stop behaving rudely to a woman, especially in front of his girlfriend. The confrontation quickly escalated, only ending after Bravo slashed Van Dyke in the neck with a piece of broken glass. Van Dyke was taken to the hospital by emergency responders, who initially did not think his injuries were life-threatening, but his condition deteriorated and he was soon placed on life support. Bravo was initially arrested for second-degree assault. 2 days later, Van Dyke's family made the difficult decision to take him off life support, and he died from his injuries. The charges against Bravo have since been upgraded to first-degree manslaughter. Despite his claims, he acted in self-defense and the case is ongoing. Number 4. Ana Maria Davila. An employee of the Hidalgo County, Texas government has landed on the wrong side of the law after authorities say he fatally shot his ex-girlfriend out of jealousy. According to reports, 43-year-old Jorge Enrique Saldana Gonzalez killed the victim, Ana Maria Davila, outside a bar called Sandra's in the city of Alamo. Officers arrived at the scene just before 11 p.m. and found Davila unresponsive on the ground with multiple gunshot wounds to the upper chest area. She died in the arms of a female witness who told police that she had gone outside to check on Davila after someone told her that gunshots had been fired outside. Court documents state that Saldana Gonzalez and Davila were seen exiting the bar together in surveillance footage that was captured just before the shooting. Saldana Gonzalez fled the scene in his pickup truck and was picked up at his home by state police. He reportedly told investigators that he felt hurt and angry after seeing Davila hug another man at the bar and had asked to speak with her outside. The accused killer admitted to shooting Davila and was booked into custody, where he remains held without bond on a first-degree murder charge. Records show that Saldana Gonzalez has been detained at the facility numerous times since 2008, including for allegations of domestic violence and violating an order of protection. Number 3. Colby Nelson. At around 3:20 a.m. on July 4th, 2024, emergency dispatchers in Taylor County, Iowa, received multiple 911 calls about a shooting at Bootlegger's Bar and Grill in the town of Clearfield. Officers arrived to find 19-year-old Colby Nelson of Lenox lying on the ground with a fatal gunshot wound to the head. The suspect, 37-year-old Alan Schultz, was still at the scene and reportedly admitted to shooting Nelson. Multiple witnesses also implicated him in the crime, telling law enforcement that Schultz had left the bar on his motorcycle and returned with a loaded handgun. According to police, he then shot Nelson twice in the face. Schultz was booked into custody on suspicion of first-degree murder, and authorities declined to go any further into detail about the incident, citing the ongoing nature of the investigation. In March of 2025, a jury found him guilty as charged after deliberating for less than an hour, resulting in an automatic life sentence without parole. Today's topic was requested by John Bockelli, 38.99, and Tamika Davis, 66.41. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Jeremy Benson. A verbal altercation between two male bar patrons in Florence, Alabama, quickly spiraled out of control on March 16, 2025, leaving one man dead and the other behind bars on suspicion of murder. The victim, 34-year-old Jeremy Benson, was still alive when police arrived at the scene. He had fallen and struck his head on the concrete floor after being punched in the face by 29-year-old Brandon Davis. Benson died in the hospital 5 days later, and Davis is now facing murder and assault charges in connection with the case. He was booked into the Lauderdale County Detention Center but no longer appears to be in custody, indicating that he likely posted the $100,000 bond required in order to secure his release. Under the terms of his bond, he's banned from going to bars, consuming alcohol, and having contact with the victim's family. In the meantime, police are hoping to hear from witnesses, especially those who may have recorded the altercation. Number 1. Alexander Evans. In October of 2022, 34-year-old Alexander Michael Evans made the regrettable decision to shoot a 65-year-old man during an altercation outside a nightclub in Fort Myers, Florida. The two had just been kicked out of the establishment due to their behavior when Evans opened fire on the unnamed victim, who died at the scene. By the time police arrived, Evans had fled the scene. Officers identified him as the suspect using his credit card, which he had left behind at the club, but they apparently didn't act fast enough to stop him from catching a flight to Europe. Evans was taken into custody at the Fort Lauderdale airport after returning to the US, and in January of 2025 he pleaded no contest to second-degree murder with a firearm, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, and battery on a person 65 or older. He was sentenced to 35 years in prison and will be nearly 70 years old when he reaches his current release date of August 2057. Thanks for watching. Would you rather go to a club every night for a year or spend a year in COVID lockdown? And why? Let us know in the comments section below.